Already? Well, good afternoon. As folks know, we are currently battling a wildfire crisis in the state of Washington. An estimated 330,000 acres of our state burned just in 24 hours yesterday. More acres burned yesterday than in 12 of the last entire fire seasons in the state of Washington. This is an unprecedented and heartbreaking event. We know that we've been well prepared for fires. We fought them before. We know how to do it. But these conditions were unprecedented. They led to explosive growth of these fires as a result of the hot and windy and very, very low humidity conditions that were so extraordinary yesterday in the state of Washington. The devastation is all over our state, from Vantage to Chelan to Omak to Colville to Graham to Spokane. We know that in one of the most traumatic events, we lost perhaps 80% of Malden in Whitman County. Perhaps 80% of that has been burned out and totally destroyed. I just talked to the mayor and city council who told me that it looked like a bomb had gone off. They lost their post office, their fire station, their city hall, their library, and most of their homes. We want the folks in Malden to know we stand with you. I will probably be there Thursday, and we're looking for every possible help we can render as quickly as we can to the traumatized people of that community. Mayor Christina Farrell was particularly appreciative of the Whitman County Sheriff's Department, who appear to have been successful preventing loss of life in that incredible event. It looks like we have not lost life. That is not a certainty at this moment. And she credited the Sheriff's Department and a lot of the other folks that on a very, very quick basis got people to take shelter from the rapidly assaultive flames that hit Malden. We will have more to say about that in the upcoming days and hours. The list of the fires is long. In Northeast Washington, they have the Cold Springs, Pearl Hill, and Apple Acres. I am pleased that an old acquaintance of mine, Howard Burnett's homestead, appears to be okay. I was watching that last night. This is personal for so many of us who have friends and relatives in these neighborhoods. In Whitman and Spokane County, with the Whitney, Babb, and Manning Road fires. In Yakima and Kittitas counties with the Evans Canyon fire. Trudy Mine's old home was just outside the evacuation line of that fire. The whole of the state of Washington state is connected to the trauma of these fires right now. There are about 100,000 people without power across the state today due to high winds and fires. And because of fires, road closures and down limbs, crews have had a hard time getting the power back up. We want to thank the hardworking IBW and other members who are working day and night to restore this power, difficult situations. Families have lost their homes. We know how traumatic that is and will be for these families. We intend to get them all the help we can to see them through these troubled days. The evacuations are widespread in Eastern Washington. If you are being evacuated and you need help finding shelter, the number to call is at the Red Cross, who's doing tremendous work for these communities. They're at 509-670-5331, 509-670-5331. In Western Washington, more than 24 fires are burning, with hundreds of people evacuated in Graham, Sumner, and Bonnie Lake. Now, it goes without saying, but I do want to ask folks, whatever information you've been given by emergency authorities for evacuations or potential evacuations, please heed them. These fires are extraordinary. They are doing things we've never seen before as to how fast they spread. So I hope you will give priority to your life and your loved ones and follow these evacuation orders. We also know that our air quality is presenting problems to people. We hope that you'll care for yourself, particularly those who have respiratory issues. We're very concerned about that for older adults and those with underlying health conditions. I spoke earlier today with Bill Tensfield, the Whitman County Emergency Manager, who's been up for about 30 hours straight, like so many of the emergency personnel have been. I want to just thank him and all of the emergency workers. We owe them so much gratitude for the work they're doing in these hot and dangerous conditions. We expect that this hot weather will continue for days to come. And I just can't reiterate, we think almost all of these fires were human caused in some dimension. If you can avoid being outside for anything that would even cause a spark, I hope people can avoid those conditions. It's not just fires, it's literally sparks that can cause these fires when these conditions are this dry. This is a new reality we're living in with the changing climate, and all of us, I hope, can pitch in so we can have less demand on these emergency personnel. Today I'm taking some action I want to talk about. With so many individuals and communities across the state in need of assistance, I have directed the Emergency Management Division and the Department of Social and Health Services to determine what emergency proclamations I will need to make to expedite any possible cash and food assistance to those in need. They're working on that literally as we speak. This fire has devastated many of our communities. We're at the point where they need help in providing government services. Like in Malden, the entire public infrastructure has been destroyed. So we are focusing our efforts, are standing up those very basic community services of communications and water and police and fire protection. And I had good discussions about the mayor about that. We're using every resources we have available to us from the air and the ground. And we will look for whatever actions and whatever resources we can bring to bear on this. Earlier this year, we had teams elsewhere across the nation to help other states. Those teams returned home, and we're getting support from other states as well where it's appropriate. Currently, the state is using aviation and ground assets to fight the fires. About a dozen helicopters we brought to bear, about a dozen planes, more than 50 engines and hand crews working to contain the flames. Commissioner Franz will have more to say about that in a moment. We also have multiple utilities and cellular companies that are helping to restore service. We appreciate their efforts as well. We know that they are pivotal. So today we're joined with Commissioner Franz, Chief John Batiste, the State Patrol Robert Ezell of our State Emergency Management Division. And they're going to have comments before I have a few more and then stand for questions. So Commissioner.
Thank you, Leader of the States. Thank you, Governor. Wildfire fighting, what we saw Labor Day is my worst fear. I know it's yours as well. We've witnessed heartbreaking and surreal destruction over the past 24 hours. More than 300,000 acres in Washington have burned since Monday. That's more than double the number of acres for the entire year last year. Thousands of homes are without power. Many families have had to evacuate their homes, and many homes, sadly, have been lost. The destruction in the small town of Malden, the governor mentioned, south of Spokane, is unimaginable. We've not seen that kind of devastation here, with reports of 80% of their homes being burned to the ground. And my heart breaks for those residents and for all those who have lost their homes or are dealing with the challenges of evacuation. Currently, the largest fire is the Pearl Hill Cold Spring Fire near Omak, which has burned 280,000 acres and is 60 miles in length. Much of the state is under extreme fire danger, both east and west. These fires are a reminder that the wildfires is not an east or west issue. It is an entire Washington state issue. Yesterday, we had 58 starts alone in our state, and thanks to the hard work of our firefighters, local, state, and federal agencies, we were able to put most of them out. But we have 9 significant fires currently burning in eastern Washington, and these fires we are dealing with started fast and furiously early yesterday morning, breaking out up and down eastern Washington. Due to dry temperatures, lots of dry fuels on the ground that catch fire and burn easily, and most critically, the hurricane force winds, something we have not seen. These high-powered winds spread fires quickly and unpredictably, and the winds and the lack of visibility grounded our planes and helicopters, which are the backbone of our initial attack response. When we see smoke, we immediately are launching our helicopters and planes to reach the fires, keep them small, get containment, help our ground crews get in safely. This approach has helped us keep our fires to 60% of them below 10 acres year after year. But unfortunately, we were unable to do that yesterday because it was unsafe to fly. The result is that these fires spread fast, and we moved quickly to get firefighters on the ground with a focus making sure that people are safe. And thankfully, despite the ferocity of these fires, we have no reports of injuries or fatalities. I want to give an update on how we are responding currently. Across Washington, we are deploying firefighters on the ground with over 1,500 firefighters. Additionally, today, I've called firefighters from the National Guard. I want to thank the National Guard again for being there for us to assist us on the fire lines. Our state air resources currently in the air, 14 rotors plus 2 Black Hawks from the National Guard, 9 single-engine air tankers, 3 air attack platforms, and 2 scoopers from Montana are once again able to fly, and we are grateful for the men and women who are flying them. But it is difficult to predict the weather patterns, and we may need to ground them again because there was no lightning in the area. We believe all of these fires we saw yesterday were human caused. We are urging every single citizen and resident of Washington State to do their part, as the governor mentioned, and prevent any starts of fires. It will help the men and women who are putting their lives on the line in the air and on the ground, as well as our community members whose homes are in very much in jeopardy and at risk. We are also announcing the temporary closure of DNR's recreation areas in all of eastern Washington. These recreation areas will be closed until Friday, at which point we will reassess. We are taking extreme caution because of the situation that we have seen over the last 24 hours. As we battle these big blazes, I urge the public to please help us prevent new fires. We simply do not have the capacity to fight additional large fires as Oregon and California continue to face significant fire situation, as well as now all of Washington State. We're urging people to comply with the burn ban that is currently in place, avoid creating those sparks, avoid brush piles. The forecast ahead is challenging. We continue to expect hot, dry, fast-moving winds to continue. In some cases of our state, we have over 65-mile-per-hour winds predicted. That means fires will move in unpredictable ways, making it challenging to get a fire under control on the ground and making it difficult for our air resources to be utilized. I want to lastly acknowledge our communities that have been significantly impacted. My heart goes out to all the families displaced by the wildfires yesterday. The devastation in the daylight today is frankly overwhelming. With the fires moving extremely fast, I know many of people left with just the clothes on their backs, and many people will not have a home to return to. I also want to acknowledge the impact of the Pearl Hill and Cold Spring fires to the Colville tribes, lands, and residents. We will continue to partner with every community, our local, state, and federal agencies, our local leaders to get on top of these fires as quickly as it can. And again, please heed the governor's advice. If residents out there want to help provide any support, please contact the Red Cross, who is taking donations. Finally, I want to close by acknowledging our firefighters. It's the greatest honor of my life to be able to lead our state's firefighting team, men and women of all ages, some the age of my eldest son, who are putting their lives on the line for the people of Washington State. I want to thank them for courageously, bravely, all the hard work and commitment that in the context of these, as well as a global deadly pandemic. Our hearts are with you. We are here for you. We are here for the people of Washington State. Thank you again, Governor. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for your leadership, Commissioner. We know you've been on top of this, so thank you very much, and your staff as well. Chief Batiste.
Thank you, Governor. On behalf of the Washington State Patrol, I want to thank all the firefighters who are helping us around the state. We have about 1,000 firefighters who are engaged with Washington State fires. Our hearts go out to everyone who's being impacted by these fires. Of the fires that are occurring in the state at this time, we're involved in 11 of those fires, having fire mobilization personnel on. I want to thank Commissioner France and all of her team for being a great assistance to us. And I want to also thank General Doherty and his folks at the military department for the tremendous work that they're doing in helping us keep people safe out there. So we're hoping that we'll all come through this together by doing the right thing and listening to the advice that's been given out by you, Governor, with regards to folks adhering to the evacuation orders when they're given. And also for the folks out on the highway, we ask that you not throw lighted material from your vehicle as you travel down the highway. That is posing a tremendous problem for us. So please use your ashtrays. Thank you, and I'll stand ready for questions when
Thanks, Chief. Robert Ezell.
Yes, good afternoon. The State Emergency Operations Center is at its highest level of activation, and our role is to provide assistance to the local jurisdictions to ensure needs are met. Our hearts go out to the individuals, the families, the communities that have been devastated by fire, and we're actively working with our local partners to do everything that we can to provide whatever assistance we can. And that ranges from when communications are down, working to reestablish communications, to work with the Red Cross on sheltering. If feeding is needed and water, we will work to, again, make sure that communities receive that level of help that they need. And so we are here to help the people who have been directly impacted by these fires. I also want to touch on federal assistance briefly. Yesterday, we applied for and received federal assistance for 3 of the large fires. Those are the Apple Acres fire in Chelan County, Cold Springs and Pearl Hill fires, and Chelan, Douglas, and on the Colville Reservation, and then the Bat fire in Spokane County. And we receive federal assistance whenever a fire is large enough and dangerous enough that it could qualify for a major disaster declaration. So the federal government, our partners at FEMA, saw the need here and then helped us with those 3 fires. Those grants will reimburse for 75% of eligible fire suppression and response costs. So it's too early to say whether we will qualify for other federal assistance. That we're going to be in this, as Commissioner France said, for many days. So as we work our way through that and we see the impact of the damages, we will of course be looking at other avenues of federal assistance. And so with that, Governor, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I know we are going to look for everything we can do in the short term. These families have literally nothing except the socks and the shirt on their back. And so we're going to do everything we can to help them as quickly as we possibly can. Most of the folks in Malden are now somewhere else other than in the community, obviously. And I talked to the mayor to see how we can possibly help them as quickly as we can with the absolute necessities of life. But these folks are going to need all of our help. Many or most of them are not insured with their homes in that community. So we know that this is a community that's going to have some real struggles, and we're going to do everything we can for them. I'd like to just, if I can, reiterate why we are so encouraging to people to listen to these evacuation orders, and why we are so sincere in our request that people not do anything that could possibly be an ignition source, even a spark. And by the way, it is just a spark. I flew into a fire by Winthrop a few years ago that started when a wheel fell off a trailer, and literally just a spark from the trailer scratching on the asphalt caused a fire that was raging when I landed. And the reason is that we're living in a new world. This is not the old Washington. A fire that you might have seen that was going to be okay over time isn't okay anymore, because the conditions are so dry, they are so hot, they are so windy, because the climate has changed. So this is a new world of forest and grassland fires that we have to be willing to recognize, and that's why we are so sincere in our request to ask people to help out. prevent these devastating losses. Before I stand for questions, I'd like to give you an update on some other issues in our other crisis, which is the COVID pandemic. It has not gone away, obviously. In fact, it continues to spread. And we have some real concerns. We have some good news I'll share in a moment, but we also have some real concerns that fall is now upon us. And fall is when we tend to go inside, when we are closer to one another, which we know increase the risk. And we know college students are now returning who live in very closely sometimes and like to socialize a lot. And I just want to address the issue of our returning college students. You're really important to our state right now. I'll tell you why. Because you're going back to colleges where you may be in remote learning, but you're living in apartments and dorms where you're living close and you have a desire to socialize. That's just deadly right now. The New York Times reported that Pullman, Washington was the #2 hotspot in the nation for new cases recently. In the past 2 weeks, there's been 600 new cases in Pullman, and that's 6.4 cases per 1,000 people. This is a major problem. I had some good discussions with the president of Washington State yesterday, or a few days ago, about their efforts. We are appreciative of the Pullman police who are issuing citations to students and non-students who are not abiding by the restrictions against too close social distancing or gatherings. Washington State University is using their student conduct code. There's potential sanctions on students for even off-campus activities, and the police are taking this seriously. We appreciate that. But that's really necessary, and we need some leadership from the college students here. This is just not a moment where typical partying is safe. It's just dangerous. So we hope as you return back to your colleges, you know, we have a little more safety and a little less Animal House, because that's what we need right now. And I'm talking to the other college presidents about their efforts as well. I will plan on visiting Pullman next week. And by the way, it's just not Cougars, obviously. University of Washington has had some experience in that with the fraternity having some outbreaks. I understand King County Health Department is working with some leadership in the Greek system in an effort to avoid these social activities that are so dangerous right now. We hope they are successful. Now, having said that, I do want to join these comments with a recognition of some of the great work that Washingtonians have been doing. I'll show you some of our progress relative to other states. This chart shows the infections per 1,000 per day or per week in the various states. And you'll see on the left the states of North Dakota and South Dakota up in the 30 to 40 range. We're number 42nd. So that means we're, in a sense, in the top 10 of having the best experience with COVID, at least at this moment. And the rates are pretty amazing, because these other states sometimes are 2, 3, 5 times higher than the rates in the state of Washington. Now, the reason I point this out is, you know, we care about those other states. We know they have challenges. But I point this out to show that what we are doing is to some degree working. The large number of people who are masking up, the businesses who are showing leadership, helping their patrons protect their employees by requiring masks and social distancing, the educators that are working so hard in such difficult circumstances with their students, and their parents now who have such challenges with remote learning. All of this effort is actually saving lives in the state of Washington. And so I think people ought to have some satisfaction and proud of what they're doing, even though it's so difficult. And it's a time where we got to keep it up right now with fall around the corner. So what we're doing has an impact. It saves lives, and I think we ought to be proud of that. Again, I want to thank everybody involved in our educational challenges we have. And that includes the students. The students are having a buckled down with a level of concentration that we've never experienced before, and we want to thank them for what they're doing as well. And we want to support all the schools as much as we can in these new ways of education. We're not done in that regard. I want to recognize some good news as well. We all suffered the heartbreak with Tahlequah, the orca, who lost her calf and carried her calf for days a few years ago. She showed us what grief really looked like, and she now appears to have a new calf that is thriving. We're very, very excited about that. Welcome Orca J57 to the state of Washington. Thank you, Tahlequah, for what you've done for our hearts in the state of Washington. With that, happy to stand for your questions, and our other speakers will take your questions as well.
First question comes from Rachel with AP.
Hi, this question is for Commissioner Franz. Is there any specific information on what caused those dozens of starts yesterday? Are there things that people may not be thinking of beyond campfires they should be cognizant of?
We right now on each one of the fires are not yet certain about how they started. We obviously have investigations going on those. But I would say I think the most important thing for people to do is, one, debris piles have been unbelievable numbers this year alone, topping what we've ever seen in the past. So people need to make sure they're not setting anything on fire within their debris piles and yards. Two is campfires, making sure right now there's a burn ban in place. They are not acceptable. People should not be lighting anything. Target shooting is not permitted on any of our lands because oftentimes that can also lead to fires, and people really should avoid any type of target shooting at this point because with dry, hot fuels on the ground, it can easily start. Also make sure on your vehicles there aren't chains. Don't park on dry grass. Those are the basics. You can go to our website too to find out more at www.dnr.wa.gov to make sure that people are taking steps necessary.
Rachel, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yes, and this would be for the governor or Dr. Lofi. Last week, the federal officials said they'd be sending tens of millions of rapid COVID tests to state governors later this month for use in reopening schools. Are we expected to be among the states to receive those tests, and what is the plan for how those will be distributed and used?
Dr. Lofi, do you have that info?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, so we are waiting for further information at this time from the federal government as to how many of those kits will be coming to Washington. The federal government, as you said, has purchased about 150 million rapid antigen tests, and we're waiting for more information this week. They have told us that there are a number of different settings where they would like us to prioritize use of those test kits, and K through 12 schools is one of those settings. We do not have final decisions as exactly where those will be going because we don't know yet exactly how many we will be receiving, but we're actively discussing what would be the most appropriate use of these tests. One thing that I think people need to keep in mind is that they are not quite as sensitive as the PCR test, meaning that they don't pick up as many people with COVID-19 that actually have it. So we're kind of talking through some of the limitations of the test, some of the benefits of the test being very rapid tests, and coming up with a plan for how those should be used.
We should also note that the administration issued some guidance restricting or reducing testing of asymptomatic people. We are not following that. It is unscientifically unsound. We're continuing to follow science in the state of Washington with our testing protocols.
Next question comes from Jim with the Spokesman Review.
Yes, Governor, are you going to seek an emergency declaration for Whitman County? And are there any plans to call out the National Guard for Malden to help with police, fire, communications, and other things that community is now going to need?
I don't know the answer to the first question. We'll make that assessment as soon as we can get some information to see if it would be helpful to the county. You can be assured that if it would be helpful and if it qualifies, we will certainly make that recommendation. as I did for the floods last year, the year before last. The National Guard is on duty, as you know, in the fire lines. We'll have further assessment from the mayor to see if the Guard could be helpful. We offered everything we could today. The thing they wanted today is information on the ground. We're going to try to get somebody there to do that. So we'll use the Guard if it is the best way to give them those resources. My suspicion is the best way is to give them the utilities they need and the communication systems they need, but we will give them what they need, and if the Guard can provide it.
The general's on the call too, if you want.
Oh, General, I didn't know you were on the call. I'm sorry. Do you want to add anything to that, General?
Well, certainly, Governor, we're still here. We're still ready to respond. And if people out there need help, all they need to do is request help. It'll go to the Emergency Management Division, and they will decide whether the Guard is the appropriate tool in the kit bag to use. But our hearts certainly go out to all those people impacted by the fires, and if we can help, we'll certainly do that.
I want to thank the Guard. They have helped our state from COVID to employment security to fighting fires. The only place they haven't helped so far is the bullpen of the Mariners, and I know they're going to help as we do this recovery. Thank you, General. Thanks for your troops.
Jim, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Will the folks in Malden have an idea, do you think by the end of the week, on what sort of aid the state might be able to offer?
By the end of the week, it is a possibility, but I don't think anybody will have certainty by the end of the week. And that is, the reason is you have to assemble the amount of damage in a county to see if it qualifies to reach federal thresholds to determine whether you can get federal assistance. Now, I also want to share and temper people's hopes about federal assistance because it is less robust than a lot of times we would like. It is much more rich, if you will, for public assets, public water utilities, libraries, city halls, than it is for private residences. So what I would say is we'll have some general ideas, but I doubt we'll have specific answers for individual homeowners or cities by the end of the week. But we will go as fast as humanly possible because we know how traumatic this is to people. And unfortunately, having been governor for going on 8 years, I've learned that the trauma to people of losing a home is something that is very visceral and long-lasting for people. And it is much more than an economic loss. And that's why I hope we can all have these folks in our hearts today, and hope people can help them out in some way.
Next question comes from Keith with Como.
Governor and Commissioner, is there any concern, you talk about human cause, that any of these were deliberate, or is it just unintentional?
Commissioner Perez, I'll speak. I think we right now don't know enough. I mean, and that's not unusual. It usually takes a bit of time for us to do the full investigation. Obviously, our first paramount responsibility right now is getting control of these fires and putting them out. But we will be following up with investigation, and we do not at this point in time have enough information on any one of these fires as to whether they were intentionally caused or unintentionally.
Keith, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, Governor, with a lot of the fires happening on this side of the mountains, what's your word to people that are driving around? Not a lot of campfires here, like in the Sumner Bonnie Lake area, Graham, Kapowson. What's the message that you want to get out because of what they're starting out right now?
A couple things. Number one, it's not just campfires that cause these fires. It's a car that's parked in the grass and ignites the grass underneath it. It's a spark from something when you're target practicing or you're breaking rocks or whatever. It's things that it's a chainsaw that sparks somehow. It's things that we don't necessarily even think about as a flame. And the reason I say that is it comes back to one of the first things I said. This is not your old Washington. We now live in a climate change world, and this vegetation, which used to be, had a little humidity in it, just doesn't have it anymore. So it's much more explosive and incendiary. So how we judge our behavior when we're outside in August and September really has to take that into account. And we just have to think about everything we do that could potentially cause fires in these conditions. The second thing is that Frank, this is a west side issue as much as an east side issue. The folks at Graham certainly understand that. We lost, I think, 8 houses. So it's something Washington has to grapple with on a day-to-day basis in this new Washington that we live in.
Next question comes from Jerry with the Everett Herald.
Yes, Governor, I guess for Commissioner Fobbs, you've already closed the recreation lands on the east side of the Cascades. Are you going to close them on the west side of the Cascades today? And if not, what's your time frame on that?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say it is one of the hardest things to close our recreation lands. I think obviously we've always truly valued our state. Getting out into our forests, our landscapes has been something that is not only physically healthy, but mentally and emotionally. I think COVID has only shown how valuable it is for us as more and more people are turning to our public lands for respite and helping their well-being. So this was one of the hardest decisions, again, to make. Our goal is to make it very short and limited, but first and foremost, our communities and protecting our communities and protecting our firefighters has got to be number one. And we wanted to make sure, one, there weren't any fires being started, but also since the fires were spreading at quick pace because of winds and they would change at any moment in time, we didn't want anybody to be in our recreation areas that could be putting their lives at risk as well. As to Western Washington, we are, of course, all of these things, we are making decisions in real time as we're watching the changing of our wind conditions, our fire conditions, our ability to fight those fires, how many fires we are fighting, and how many resources we have. At this point in time, we're not looking at the need to close the west side recreation areas, but people that if anybody sees on the Washington State, we have extreme fire danger in every corner of our state. So this is not an east side only issue. It is an entire state issue. So be patient with us, but we are going to be erring on the side of caution and public safety always.
If I could add something to this too, this is not just a state of Washington issue. This is a national and international issue. California has had 2 million acres burn already. You've heard of the devastation that's taken place. We're very happy about the evacuation by helicopter of a couple hundred people who are in a remote area. And this has happened because we have had enormous climate change. And this presents unrivaled challenges for all of us, both in fighting these fires and hopefully figuring out a way not to start them. So we are all in this together in the Western United States. And we've got to be allied in this effort, both to prevent these fires and to reduce the conditions that cause them, which is this incredibly dry vegetation, incredible heat, and incredible wind. And we've got to be allied in that.
Jerry, would you like to ask a follow-up?
I guess for the commissioner and possibly the governor, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your support of thinning forests to improve the health of forests. Could it have reduced the damage in these fires or going forward? And I guess I want to understand the governor, if you support that policy of thinning forests to improve the health of forests.
Yes, we have had active management in our forests for some time. The commissioner has done a good job leading that effort, and it has been successful in a number of opportunities, reducing the spread of these fires by reducing their intensity. To have forests that more mimic more natural conditions where you have less stand replacement fires. Those are fires that replace the whole stand. Instead, they burn low and slow and relatively cool on the forest floor. So we have made an investment of dollars to continue that active management. As to what extent they would have for these fires, my sense is, particularly in the eastern Washington fires, many of them have been in grasslands and shrublands, which are equally, in some sense, explosive as forests. And active management is really not an option in those environments.
So, and I'll add to this. Let me first say we absolutely have a forest health crisis in Washington State. In Central and Eastern Washington alone, we have over 2 million acres of forest that are dead, dying, and diseased and leading to these catastrophic fires. About half of that is federal lands. We have made huge progress starting in 2018 after completing the 20-year forest health plan, which has us treating 1.25 million acres over the next 20 years. We've made huge progress, but we are just at the beginning of that work with much more to go. So it is the case that our forests are seriously ill and leading to more catastrophic fires. On the west side of the state, we have a forest health crisis here as well. Our plan for the west side forest and restoring the health and resiliency of those forests will be completed at the end of this year. The reason we're seeing more fires on the west side is because we have a changing forest over here as to their health and resiliency. As to the fires, to the governor's point, as to the fires that erupted in the last 24 hours, a majority of those are grasslands, but we do have some areas that have timber in it. That, again, the grass, the brush, the timber were very, very hot, very dry, because we've had a hot, drying conditions this year, as well as previous years. And I just have to say, we have to continue. If we want to see the change in trajectory of these catastrophic fires year after year in Washington State, we are going to have to make a commitment to the work that needs to be done in restoring the health and resilience of these forests to fire year after year. It can't be something that's in favor one year and out of favor the next year. It will not change the trajectory. We will not be able to protect our communities. We will not be able to protect our landscapes, and we will not be able to protect our fighters. And we don't have enough resources to fight the kinds of fires we're seeing just over the last 24 hours in every corner of the state. We must take the investments now. And when we do, as we look at the economic crisis that COVID has created and existed in many of these communities before COVID, when we do that forest health work, not only are we ensuring the long-term health of the environment and reducing this destructive reality of wildfires, we are actually able to create jobs. And that is a way that we can get a win across the board and not only make our forests and our landscapes more resilient, but truly make our communities more resilient. Thanks.
Next question comes from Essex with Cairo.
Yes, Governor, you mentioned that people may be disappointed in the level of federal aid they can get for their individual circumstances. Will the state be able to offer additional aid to help fill those gaps?
We don't know. We'll do everything we can within the limits of the law and our budgets to do that. We know how traumatic this is for folks. I can't tell people 24 hours after the fires what will be available, but we'll obviously look at all we can do for these families.
Essex, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yes, Governor. We have talked some about the folks in Malden. Just a brief mention of Graham. Would you expand on your thoughts about the folks in Graham where those homes have been destroyed and a neighborhood wiped out?
Well, the loss of any home in any part of our state, rural or urban, large or small, or, is the same. It's the loss of your security. It's the loss of your sense of attachment. It's the loss of a sense of confidence. And that's why it's so psychologically difficult for families who go through this kind of experience. It's not just an economic loss, is the point I wanted to make. And that's why all of us, I hope, can find a way to embrace these families. And that's why we'll look for ways to help them through maybe with counseling to help them through these issues. So I hope all of us can feel that same sense of loss that they're sharing and help them out. I do want to say, though, by helping them out, in order to help them out, you need to start years before the fire. If we're gonna reduce homes from burning in 2025, we've got to start in 2020, in 2021, because by 2025 it's too late. When this wind is blowing, and all of the grass is so dry because of climate change, and so hot, and this wind gets going at 60 miles an hour, there's no force on earth that can contain that fire. At that point, it's just too late. So the work we need to do for these families in these communities, we need to start now to save them for the years and the decades in the future. And I hope people keep in mind the devastation we're suffering right now as we consider what we can do to prevent these fires. And I hope that that'll happen.
Next question comes from Austin with Northwest News Network.
It sounds like there's actually a fire burning in Thurston County at this hour that may have been started by a transformer. I know that power lines and power infrastructure have been an issue in California. There's even been culpability, I think, or blame assigned to these utilities. Are you in a position, or anybody at the state level, to order the power to be shut down to prevent the possibility of fires being sparked?
I suspect there are circumstances where we could do that. It has not been under active consideration, at least in my office, given the situation and the consequences of loss of power for millions of people. So at the moment, that decision has not been made or seriously considered. I do know in California there were substantial issues about maintenance and adequate maintenance of lines. I suspect that we'll be asking some questions about that after this fire season. It's a legitimate question to ask.
Austin, if I could add to that, I actually spoke with the CEO of this as well as the CEO of PSE in the last 24 hours. One, I wanted to thank them because both of their teams have been on the ground working very closely with our teams, getting up in front of these fires to be able to make sure that they had transmission lines down, turned down so the fires did not cause more havoc to it. I also was working closely with them on the communication and making sure that we are working well together as these fires are spreading and as wind is changing them so that we can be working in partnership so we are not causing more damage in the process.
Austin, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Oh, just briefly on behalf of my colleague, Scott Leadingham in Pullman, Governor, are you, could this also, if these fire conditions continue, are you considering or could you consider some sort of stay-home order a la what you did with COVID?
Well, I suppose we haven't given serious consideration to anything like that. The difficulty of that is that these fires, you know, anywhere where there's grass, there's a fire potential, and that's virtually the entire state. So it's staying home, you know, means not going outside of your house. In any question, no, we have not given serious consideration to that. But we are doing what I think is responsible, which is urging people to be as careful as humanly possible in these very dangerous moments. And that means maybe not going out and using a chainsaw in the forest, obviously not campfires, but not anything that can cause a spark. And not doing that anywhere where there's dry grass certainly is the name of the game at the moment.
Time for a few more questions. Next question comes from Tony with the Wenatchee World.
I'll pass. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next question comes from Janelle with the Yakima Herald.
Thank you. My question is for Commissioner Franz. I'm wondering if you have any more details on the Evans Canyon fire and the cause of it specifically.
We don't currently yet have actual confirmation of the cause of that fire. We have made significant progress. When I was out there on Friday, we were at about 20% containment. As you know, that was a fire that was, again, with wind conditions, really hot, dry, fuel with the grass. It was a very difficult fire that took us several days to get even 20% containment. And obviously, we all are well aware of the 6 homes that were destroyed as a result, and then the hundreds of people that were, 950 people, families that were evacuated. We did have good news that we're coming out that we're at least at 60% containment, and we are seeing the ability to mop that fire up and be able to hopefully put an end to it, let people get back to their homes, and enable us and our firefighters to move on to the next fires. As you know, we have a number of them.
I'd like to thank my former neighbors in the Weenass Valley who were cooperative with the firefighters in those evacuations too. That was really helpful, and we hope they're going to get back.
Janelle, would you like to ask a follow-up?
No, thank you.
All right, final words, Governor?
No, thank you very much. Please be safe.